Nimbus Simulation Studios just released the update to the UH-1H for X-Plane 12, and although it doesn't bring any new features, it brings the model up to XP12 standards and gets everything functional and working, and it's flying beautifully. There has been a lot going on in flight simulation in the news lately with all sorts of different products and new programs out there, and in the meantime X-Plane 12 has just been quietly, slowly improving in the background and just turning into a great piece of software. You know, I did a video not quite a year ago, back in March of 2024, and I had the X-Plane 11 version flying in X-Plane 12. Of course, X-Plane 12 has not had a chance, or had not had a chance to mature at that time, so here I'm flying over Fa'a International Airport in Tahiti, and this is part of the Windward Islands and Society Islands from Maps to X-Plane, which is one of my favorite developers because they just bring a level of detail and realism to the sceneries that they produce for X-Plane 12, and they just look spectacular to fly in, and they're a ton of fun with a lot of detail. Nimbus reached out on their socials back at the end of summer, early fall in 2024, and they were looking for some of their existing customers to do some testing on X-Plane 12 to get the Huey update out there. So I had volunteered to do some testing, but I have purchased both the civilian and the military versions for X-Plane 12, so at this point I think I have 4 different Hueys across my simulation platforms, which I really don't mind. I don't mind. I'm a collector of virtual helicopters, I guess. I really enjoy the Huey. It's iconic. It's a classic machine. It's one of my favorite helicopters, even though I've been around them and in them. I've never had a chance to fly one in real life. That's a bucket list item. So, but I do have extensive experience in Robinsons, which is a very similar rotor system. So it's flying how I expect it to fly, and doing the things and little idiosyncratic behaviors that you get from a two-bladed teetering rotor system. I started testing the update at the end of January this year, I think is when the team got them out, got the files out to us, and a few little minor things, bugs here and there, mostly having to do with hardware conflicts, but the team pretty much had everything working and functioning very well inside X-Plane 12. There's no longer issues with the governor and the rotor RPM. That's all functioning correctly. I was able to pull fuses, so everything that I tried to do and everywhere I expected issues that I had with the version 11 inside X-Plane 12 has been corrected. So I'm very happy. I haven't run into anything yet with this model that is off. Like I said, I haven't done a full range of testing, and I don't plan to, but it's flying how I expect it to. I'm very happy with this update. That being said, it is the most current version now, up to date, of the Hueys that I have. So we can talk about different simulation platforms. I fly Microsoft, I fly DCS, or Digital Combat Simulator, and I also fly X-Plane, and occasionally I do fly Prepared or P3D. And every once in a while, or on the back burner, I have Aerofly as well. So a lot of talk about that one being a very good version of the R22, but I actually prefer the X-Plane 12 R22. So right now, my preferred Huey is this one, is the Nimbus version of the UH-1H. It is performing how I expect it to. It's matching my expectations across the most of the flight envelope. So we'll fly it around and enjoy the update here and put it through its paces. We'll do a startup just to listen to it. I'm not going to run through the checklist or anything. I think there's been enough of those on the web and on YouTube already for starting up a Huey. But we'll just listen to the startup from the outside and take a look at it and do some auto rotations and fly it around and enjoy it. Looking at this ship flying around here in X-Plane 12, a lot of people like to, or I do hear a lot of complaints about the graphics of X-Plane 12, but I don't think that it's a graphics problem or issue. I actually think the graphics in X-Plane 12 are quite nice. They're very good. They're advanced, and I think they're on par with every other simulation platform out there. But it's the scenery that is an issue, and it's the mesh. The mesh is very flat and very nondescript in X-Plane, and that's kind of the issue that we have. That's where I'd like to see some improvements, and listening to the developers talk, I think that's somewhere they're going to work on. I didn't want to talk and disrupt the sound of the startup, so now rewind that section and watch that startup again, and we'll talk further about the little details in the scenery and the little details in the aircraft and things that this sim does that are great. So when you go back and watch that startup again, you'll start to notice little things like the movement of the fuselage in relation to the skids, and how the tail boom starts to vibrate, and even little things like the antenna at the top of the tail. And you'll notice that when you're flying along, that actually drags in the wind and is modeled very realistically. So little things like that bring the aircraft to life in this sim, and those are little things that X-Plane 12 does so well. It really brings a lot to the simulation genre when it comes to aircraft representation and how well all of the little systems and details of the aircraft are represented. So while talking about that, the other side of that is that the X-Plane 12 developers often talk about how, well, the scenery isn't that important to flying. It doesn't make that much of a difference to flying. Well, neither do any of those little details about the tail wobbling on the ramp. So I have a hard time with that argument. at this point now, it's possible to say that it didn't make sense with the technology at the time, but we're in a different place now, and they've recognized it. So there's actually tools that the X-Plane developers are working on. Laminar is looking into how to use the new tools to upgrade their scenery engine, because they know that it is not where it needs to be for a modern simulator. There are some definite areas where the scenery does not look great, and I've specifically pulled some areas from this video to look at some of the default areas. So the section that you're looking at right here is the surrounding area of scenery that I have from V Skylabs, and that's what most of this is shot at, and that's base 8. And I like using base 8 for helicopters because it has a lot of cool features, and it's got like a little skate park area that makes for good practice in doing slope landings and other maneuvers with helicopters. So I actually have a plug-in for doing some sling loading that I'm going to play with the R44, so I'll have another video for that later. But you can kind of see these areas. Like, yes, it's a glacier, and glaciers are pretty nondescript, but this is the area where X-Plane struggles in their default scenery, and it's a question of resources most likely, but they need to come up with better tools, because there's no excuse for the edges of lakes and ponds to look the way that they do in the simulator. But then you can have moments like this, where in that same subset of scenery, if you cut out the areas that you know what you're looking for, you can make it look so real. And one of the other new additions in the beta program that they're working on right now is the physics-based cameras. So it's nice to have for 2D monitors, and I can see some pilots really welcoming that. It's similar to something like FS Realistic. I don't need it or use it in VR, because VR kind of replaces it in a different way. But it's really nice for shooting some of these exterior shots and having a nice motion, or like handheld type camera motion in some of the external views. It's nice. So they're continually improving and bringing features to the sim and making it more user friendly in a modern environment. And just look at how good it can look, and how realistic it can look. And the physics modeling is great, but again, that always comes down to the individual helicopters. Right, just like in any simulation software, the individual developers have a lot of leeway in making the aircraft fly correctly. We'll get to that in discussing auto rotations with this helicopter, and the first one that I did was a hovering auto, and it performed great, and I was really happy with it. But I've done hovering autos in X-Plane 12 with the default R22, and you roll off the throttle and you raise the collective as you're doing that, and the R22 gains altitude in X-Plane, which, if you've ever done an auto rotation, a hovering auto rotation in an R22, there is no point in time ever when you roll off the throttle and you lift the collective that it will gain altitude. It does not happen. So I've yet to come under a performance situation where it occurs. Anyway, so there are things that are not correct with the flight model in every simulation. But that doesn't mean that the simulation is terrible and that it shouldn't be seen for accuracy anywhere else. It can fly correctly 99% of the time, but there are little things in pretty much every simulation software that something is not correct, or it doesn't respond the way the real aircraft would. And that is across the board with every piece of software. There is not one simulation software I've ever used that nails helicopters perfectly in every flight regime. Base 8 is a great place to just kind of mess around. It keeps your interest and helps you develop some of your fine slow speed handling skills. So it's a great piece of software, a great add-on to throw into your scenery collection if you're a helicopter pilot. So we'll take a look and do some autos. Here's a hovering auto. Working on just doing some straight in auto rotations, nothing crazy, just to kind of get a feel for the model. Like I said, I've never flown a Huey in real life, and this is where it would be beneficial to have an instructor run through. I didn't quite get my technique down right, so my sliding or my run on landings and my flare is off. So I don't know if I'm flaring too high or what exactly I'm doing wrong, but I need to keep working at it to get my termination of my auto rotations correct here at the end. It is one of the more challenging things in auto rotations is to get that pitch forward after the flare correct. So you just want to make sure that you time all those things correctly, because that's kind of the bread and butter of getting the auto rotation correct and nailing your landing spot is knowing when to time those elements. So that's why we practice. That's why we do it, to build the muscle memory, so that when the situation occurs, it just happens and you do it instinctively. But that's also why it is good to work with an instructor and not do these things on your own, especially if you're training in real world, because you don't want to ingrain bad habits and bad muscle memory that you have to undo or fix, so it doesn't cause you a problem in a real situation. My poor technique aside, I find the model to be great, fun to fly, and good to run through the paces, and it performed how I expected it to. Doing these auto rotations, I was able to manipulate the rotor RPM as I expected, and I just need to practice. If helicopters are your thing, take a serious look at X-Plane 12. It really is a great simulator. It's a great base platform. It has a lot to offer, and with little effort, you can really make some areas look very realistic and very enjoyable to fly in. Thanks for watching. Be safe, be kind, and I'll see you in the next video.